All right, welcome to this video. My name is Taylor Benchard, and in this video, I wanted to share with you the 5 principles of agency automation that can allow you to maintain 70+% margins in your agency at scale, up to $50,000 to $100,000 per month. I'm 100% sure that this model and the 5 principles that we're going to talk about will work even if you're doing between $50,000 to $100,000 per month in your agency. And it's more than achievable if you're doing $10,000 to $20,000, $25,000 per month in your agency. So, yeah, I mean, I have my own agency. I have a PPC agency. We manage Amazon advertising. I work about an hour a week on the agency now. My primary focus is on, I've actually transitioned from running my own agency to actually just helping other agency owners that are doing 5 to 6 figures to scale up to 7 figures and go from that 5 to 6 to 7 figures while maintaining ridiculous margins like 70+%, which pretty much no agencies usually do. So let's start with number 1. Hiring is the worst decision you can possibly make when it comes to automating your agency and maintaining high margins. Now, obviously you need to hire at some point. So what do I mean by this? Well, out of all possibilities that you have, like let's say that you no longer want to talk to your clients. Let's say you no longer want to perform this certain deliverable of writing content for clients or doing the web design work or just doing the deliverables in general in your agency. You no longer want to do this one certain deliverable. And so instantly what almost 99% of agency owners will think is, okay, I need to hire somebody for this. And they'll do that. And I mean, usually that's the worst decision that you can possibly make. You should never think, all right, I'm just going to hire somebody to do this. What you want to do is run through principle number 2, which is the EAD Framework. So EAD stands for Eliminate, Automate, and Delegate. So eliminate, this is kind of a framework that I'll use mentally when there's a deliverable or something that I don't want to do or that I think could be automated. And I won't think, okay, I need to delegate this. My first thought will be, can I eliminate this process? So it's kind of a counterintuitive, unconventional approach. First, I'll ask myself, is it possible that I can actually eliminate this deliverable? Is it really necessary to get the client the result that they are seeking, that they are paying me to get them? And if it's not necessary, this rarely happens, but sometimes it does. And it takes a lot of self, introspection, if that's the right word. You got to really be honest and have high humility. And if you can eliminate it, that's great. And if you can't eliminate it, then you want to move on to A, which is automate. And so you want to ask yourself, okay, can this process of writing content for clients, or can this process of doing keyword research or communicating with clients or doing the weekly reports for clients, whatever the deliverable is that you don't want to do, you really want to ask yourself, is it possible that I can automate this deliverable so that not myself has to do this, not somebody else has to do this, but a machine can handle this and can do this process for me. And this is where you will find a lot of gold. And pretty much nobody asks themselves if the process can be automated, but almost 90% of the time it can be automated, especially if it's a deliverable for a client that does not require talking to the client. It requires doing some form of manual work. And so you really want to ask yourself, can I automate this process? In our own agency, I was delegating keyword research, I was delegating launching campaigns, I was delegating managing campaigns. Like we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per month in the beginning. Now I think, I don't know how much we actually manage per month. It might be $500,000, it might be $1 million a month in ad spend. Not a large amount, but a decent amount. And that was all being managed and by delegation. Okay, and so this is when, in the beginning, our agency didn't have very high margins. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week, just a ridiculous amount of work. For the first 2 years in my agency, I probably worked between 70 to 100 hours per week, every single week. And I was, delegating as much as I could, but I was still working a lot because really I was delegating things that should have been automated. So we went through this EAD framework, and we ended up being able to automate keyword research, automate the campaign launching, automate the bid management of all the campaigns for our clients. And we pretty much automated like 80% of the things that were taking up a lot of our time and that were mentally stressing me out. And since we automated it, the person who was delegated to manage that certain thing also had a lot of time freed up. So, our margins just went through the roof when we built this custom software to launch campaigns for clients, when we built the software to do keyword research. And a lot of it has to do with software, because when you think about what is a machine, normally the type of agency that I'll be working with, or the type of agency that I own personally, I mean, it's a digital, we're doing advertising online. So you can call it a digital agency. We're not doing like creating billboards or physical actual things. It's all digital. So software is a huge piece of automation. And in the worst case scenario, if something cannot be automated, we will delegate that specific task. So for example, some things can't be automated, like talking to the client cannot be automated. It cannot be eliminated because we need to actually talk to the client. What you can actually do is, instead of eliminating it, what you can do is you can reduce it. So you always also want to be asking yourself, how can I reduce, instead of like, you know, typically staying with the status quo. So if you normally do weekly client calls, or you do bi-monthly client calls where you do it, I think bi-monthly makes sense, twice a month. I used to do this with clients, but then I found out my clients actually didn't want to do the calls. They were hopping on the calls for over a year. And then I hired an account executive, and it was funny, when she started handling the accounts and the clients that I was once managing, none of the, like, she would ask to hop on a call, but since it wasn't me, they wouldn't hop on the call because they didn't even want to hop on the call in the first place. So she basically was able to reduce the client calls to once a month, sometimes even once every 2 months. And that's amazing because, you know, instead of, we can't fully eliminate it, but we can reduce it. So if I was to add a second thing in here, it would probably be ERAD, like ERAD, or ERAD. And that's what you want to do. You want to follow this framework whenever you have a deliverable that you don't want to do or something. And it goes very deep. Like, it's not just as simple as eliminate, automate, delegate. Like, oh, this is what it is. No, you have to really think about it. The deliverable, like keyword research. A lot of people don't think it's possible to automate such a task. But pretty much 98% of it can be automated, and we did that through building software. And it takes a lot of thinking and mental processing power to be able to think about how you can automate such a deliverable that's so important to getting the client results. But it is possible, especially if you know what you're doing. And principle number 3 is always increasing maximum capacity. So when you think about hiring your first account executive, when you think about hiring your first virtual assistant, your first content writer, your first web designer, your first software engineer, whatever it is, the person that you're hiring, there's going to be a maximum capacity. Everybody has a maximum capacity to them. If you look at it from strictly like a point of time, like time as a viewpoint, you know, you likely have 10 to 12 hours in the day to work. And maybe only 8 or 9 of those hours, you have a good mental, like, peak performance. Like, usually in the first 3 to 4 hours of the day, you're most awake, you're most aware, and in your peak mental performance. So maximum capacity also has a lot to do with like how much time you have in a day, but I'm talking more about efficiency. So strictly from the standpoint of an account executive should be able to handle $400,000 to $500,000 per year in client revenue. All right. So this is now what we're talking about, is we're talking about revenue per employee, which is a pretty important metric in an agency, since the primary cost of an agency is labor. It's human labor. And so what you have to do is maximize your revenue per employee. And in order to do that, you need to increase their maximum capacity, which means their maximum workload, the amount of work that they can get done. How do you increase an account executive's maximum capacity? Well, you need to be relentlessly, you know, following this EAD framework and getting all the deliverables possible automated and off of their plate, so that the only job an account executive has to do, and this is similar to what we have in our agency right now, is talk to the client and just manage the offshore team that is going to be doing the work. So in a lot of agencies, the account executive does the work and they talk to the clients. And if you look at Henry Ford and how he built Ford, and in the early days when he created the production line for vehicles, like he was like the first guy who came up with a production line that had a conveyor belt, and it carried the cars, like the Model T that Henry Ford made back in the early 1900s. It would carry the cars on a conveyor belt, and as the cars would go slowly across this conveyor belt, there would be a person on each side of the conveyor belt, and they would put one little bolt on the car, and then they would put one, and then it would keep moving. And the next guy would put, like, he would screw in another bolt, and then the next guy he would put some other piece on, and each person in that system that Henry Ford created was doing one thing. They were putting one bolt on the car all day, and it's super monotonous, it's super tedious, and it was terrible work because you were doing the same thing every single day. But in doing that process, he was able to squeeze and like create a ridiculous levels of maximum capacity with each employee that he had in the manufacturing line, because it was so efficient at that time. Nowadays you have robots, but in that time it had to be done by a human. And so the fastest or the most efficient way that it can be done by a human is if the human was doing one task all day. And so we followed this principle in our agency and done our best to make sure that the account executive who is dealing with the account, right? They're managing the client, they're retaining the client and making sure that the client stays with your agency forever, that their only job is to talk to the client and basically just communicate with the client and not do the work. So who's doing the work then? Who's actually making sure that the client's account is getting results? Well, that leads us into our next principle, which is number 4, work is offshore. So deliverables 90% of the time are done offshore, okay? And we have a team in the Philippines which is doing pretty much 90 to 95% of all deliverables in the agency. The only thing that our account executive will be doing is saying, hey, Lee, this is one of the girls that works in our agency, she's out in the Philippines, and our account executive will sign a new client, right? And they will just say, okay, we're gonna run an audit, which is automation, and there's a software that they do to run the audit. So they click a button, run the automation, they get the audit, and they say, okay, and then they click another button, and they run a second automation, and they pull out the keyword research, and then they send they open up like a project in Trello, which is our project management tool, and they say, all right, Lee, we have this new client, and we need to do the ASS1. ASS1 stands for Account Setup Stage 1. It's the first phase on any client onboarding in our agency, and it's kind of the framework that we've developed. And so the work for delivering the result for the client, which is increasing their sales by $10,000 to $100,000 per month, that's typically what our agency shoots for with any client, while maintaining a profitable or a decent ROAS, return on ad spend, that the client is happy with. And the work will all be done by the VA team, the virtual assistants offshore. And virtual assistants, if you don't know, they're extremely hardworking, they're very loyal, they're amazing, and of course you have to find the right person, but generally the experience that I've had with dealing with people in the Philippines is they are great. I mean, they're phenomenal workers, and they're very grateful to be able to working from their laptop from home. And I mean, if you pay them around $800 per month, which is pretty much nothing compared to an account executive that you might be paying $50,000, $60,000 per year starting out, it's so cheap, and they can do high quality work if they have the right processes and SOPs, which we're not talking about yet in this framework, but that's important, is work is offshore. All right, and then number 5 is delegation and client communication is onshore. So what does this mean? Well, the account executive is delegating the work. The account executive is overlooking the virtual team in the Philippines and is saying, okay, we just signed this client, Lee, you're doing this, like Daryl, you're doing that, Beverly, I need you to do this, and that's it. And since our service that we're offering is the same with every client, it's not different, it's just clockwork, it just happens, right? We have a niche, we have a well-defined process, we have a productized service, which is probably one of the principles that I should put on here. Productized service is essentially, it's a service, but it's become like a product because it's so standardized, like it's the same every single account, it's the same processes, it's the same steps, every single account, no matter what the account is, it's the same. And that's a productized service, and we've achieved that in our agency because we go through the same processes, the same thing, every single client, every single time. Just give us the right account and we'll be able to do that. And so the delegation and the client communication is done by the account executive. And if this is all the account executive is doing, they'll be able to handle $400,000 to $500,000 per year in client revenue. So the revenue per account executive should be between $400,000 to $500K per year. I know this myself before I hired an account executive, because myself personally, I was managing about $35,000 a month worth of clients. And if you do the math on that, $35,000 a month, it's roughly $400,000 per year, if I'm doing my math correctly, $410,000 or something like that per year. And I mean, I even when I was doing it, it wasn't at maximum. I wasn't at maximum capacity. Like, there was still room for the system that I was doing when I was managing all those clients to increase my maximum capacity. So I think that it's possible to even get it higher than 400,000 to 500,000 per year, but that level is pretty good, because if you think about how much do you pay an account executive? Well, starting out, we paid our account executive, I think it was part-time, it was like $2,000 per month, part-time when she started out. When she came on full-time, I think we were paying her, $4,000 a month, which is about $48,000 a year. Not a lot, but a starting account executive, and they get to work from their laptop, and they're in the learning phase, and they're not really fully in it. But now, I'm not sure the exact amount that we pay our account executive, but I think we just pay her about $2,500 every 2 weeks, so it's about $5,000 a month, so it's about $60,000 per year. And there's a little bit of incentive-based pricing where she gets a commission on certain accounts. So it's more than that depending on her performance, because some of it is based around performance and commission. But let's say I do pay an account executive just $70,000 a year, and she is bringing in $400,000 per year. Well, do the math on that. I mean, even if her cost was 100 and she was bringing in 400 in revenue, the margin on that is basically higher than 70%. Okay, and that's what you're shooting for, right? 70% margins in an agency. To achieve that, you need to productize your service, SOP everything, have the work done offshore, have the account executives only doing delegation and client communication, not deliverables. Offshore, deliverables are done offshore. Relentlessly increase the maximum capacity of each employee, whether it's the virtual assistants or the account executives. Those are the two primary roles in an agency for our agency. And you always want to be thinking, how can I allow my virtual assistant or the offshore team to do more work per employee so that we can squeeze more revenue out of each person? And that's how you have to think of it. And then the EAD framework, elimination, automation, delegation. Don't just hire people for every little task that you need to get done. Either ask yourself if you can eliminate it, reduce it, or automate it to increase your maximum capacity. And remember that hiring is the worst decision. It is the last and final thing on the agency automation framework, EAD, that you should be doing, right? It's the final and last straw. Like, if you cannot automate it, if you cannot eliminate it, you're gonna have to delegate it. But before you delegate it, ask yourself if you can drastically reduce it with software or with a certain piece of automation that might require a human touch. And if you can drastically reduce it by 50, 80%, whatever it is, that means you can greatly increase your maximum capacity and of course increase your margin. So these are really 5 important principles. I didn't talk at all about productizing your service and SOPing and project management tools and tools for creating like an agency university where you're creating like a project plan for like the whole year for the client and all of that. But these are 5 important things that will get you thinking more about how can I actually achieve 70% margins, because it is possible, even if you're doing $50,000 to $100,000 per month in your agency. So, and I know for sure if you have a PPC like a Google AdWords or a management agency, 100% sure it's possible, because that's our agency, that's where we come from. Content marketing, web design, all the other stuff. I'm not 100% sure, but like the principles are universal. It's all the same, and a lot of the work can be delegated offshore. You just need really good SOPs. So hopefully you enjoyed these 5 principles. Again, I made this video because right now what I'm doing in Lead Gen Enlightened is I am building week 3 of the program, which is entirely about removing yourself from the agency so it can run without you, and while maintaining 70% margins. And that's a difficult thing to do. It took me a month straight of about 12 to 14 hours per day, like literally 7 days a week, to do that. And I was actually forced into that position. That's a long story, but I had to do it because I was working, I was burning out relentlessly in my agency, and I didn't have an account executive. I was managing like way too many clients by myself, and I was doing way too much work. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you liked it, feel free to click that subscribe button, like the video, and I'll be releasing again a video every single week. I'm going to try to do it consistently on Saturdays. So stay tuned, and thanks again for watching this video. Ciao.